Hello, welcome to this week's video on My Hero Academia. This week I'm reviewing episode 9.5 of Vigilantes. You know the rules and so do I. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below, and you'll be right at your next week's show. Whilst you're there, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. We're really close to breaking 90 subscribers, and it would be great to do so by the end of the year. With all that said and done, on to the review. And just a couple of things before we start off. First of all, I have got the window open, so if you hear any weird noises, that's where it's coming from. And two, I am sorry if I sound a little bit distracted this week, because right now I can hear a phone ringing because I called it. Now, granted, it hasn't been confirmed yet, but I'm quietly confident that my theory is going to hold out. But more on that later, as for the actual review itself and actually talking about the positives and the things about this thing. I have to say that this particular episode was rather action-packed. Though, to be fair, it wasn't just action. There was a little bit more character development on Stendhal, or more likely, or more accurately, actually establishing a character for them. Because last week, as cool as they were, that's all they really were, was just a cool, badass-looking character. Or more specifically, this week we get to learn a little bit more about their modus operandi, what makes them tick, why they're doing what they are doing, or at least in a very headline basic kind of way. We are very much this week setting the stakes on their skill and power, though just to end up underlining it, they aren't just some skilled so-and-so with a blade, they also have a quirk, a very familiar looking quirk at that. On the action side of things, I have to say that the writers and artists really did a great job with this one. Whilst this is just a big series of action sequences, or just really one main action sequence midway through, I have to say that it was brilliantly well put together and directed, or as directed as a manga can end up being. It was a tight, claustrophobic environment, and this was translated in some really tight, claustrophobic panels. It really ended up making it feel like they really were fighting in such a small space, which, from what we can see by the artwork, really was the case. It truly reflected how it seemingly felt for Stendhal's victims. It was a quick, violent, and bloody affair, even though it was against some rather familiar-looking foes, which we might well end up talking about later on. Well, no max about it, I will be talking about that later on. But still, again, it really translates itself well into a fight like this. This is supposed to be a quick, claustrophobic, tight, very narrow battle, and that's what we end up getting. It perfectly translates itself. I'm not sure how exactly they'll do this in the anime, if there indeed is one. I can't help feel that it might come across a little bit generic, because this fight really works brilliantly in a manga. It really does. I think that this really uses its material, it uses its medium near perfectly. I mean, it probably is, pound for pound, one of the best action sequences I've seen in My Hero Academia Vigilantes thus far, at least from a conceptual point of view, and probably one of my favourite, well, I won't say favourite comic book action sequences ever, but it's probably still up there. I will think that the fight itself maybe wasn't quite as epic as I was hoping it was going to be, because, of course, we have Stendhal there with his ace in the hole with those blood samples. As without them, I quite frankly feel that when you take away those blood samples, and without the plot armor that he has, you know, the whole thing about ninja equals bullet dodging, he probably would have got walloped rather hard, but, you know, you never know, he might have been able to overcome them without that, but, you know, it's not like they're going to kill him off here and now because of, well, who he might actually end up being. This is a prequel after all, because that would otherwise be one hell of a ballsy move if they did, but still, overall, great action. I have to say that it was really great learning a little bit more about Stendhal. It wasn't quite the deep dive that I was hoping that we'd get, but getting an understanding as to who he was under the mask, at least on a personal level, was great. Getting an understanding of what makes him tick was good. Again, I really do wish there was more here, but we are early into their debut into the series, so we'll end up getting more about them as we go forward. I feel that with this one, and whilst I won't necessarily include this as a negative, I do feel that more time was spent setting up the gangsters more so than Stendhal themselves. Maybe half of the runtime of this episode, if you can really call it runtime, is spent establishing these Yakuza members, and they just get offed almost as quickly as they end up appearing. Which is a disappointment, because I think they really are neat and well presented, and for a world like this, for a story like this centered around vigilantes, dealing with a bunch of just gangsters would have been great. but I suppose that doesn't really fit in with this whole Shonen Jump anime thing that something so relatively grounded would end up happening. Still, it was great for world building, learning a little bit more about them, learning that even these Yakuza members have to be registered as villains, which is a very absurd thing, because if you really are a villain, if you really are a gangster, wouldn't you not do that? Especially if you're trying to present yourself as being a little bit more of a legitimate businessman, but hey ho, we'll just ignore that for now. I will say that I think that we'll probably end up getting a little bit more on Stendhal next week. That'll be probably where we go into a deeper dive of things. I feel that if, again, this is made into an anime, this will be half of an episode, and what we get next week would be the other half of it, but we'll soon see about that. I will admit that, well, we might as just rip the band-aid off and just go straight into this. This guy's Stain. He really is Stain. There's no getting away from it. Last week I speculated that it might be him. So yeah, it really is Stain. It's an earlier version of Stain. I mean, he feels like your outside of him being Stain, he really is just your fairly typical gritty vigilante superhero character like the Punisher or Rorschach or Spawn, which makes him an interesting contrast to the other series that we've seen in this series more generally, both in terms of vigilantes and in regards to the main series itself, as they tend to feel a little bit more typically anime or more typically American-style superheroes. And this guy really isn't. He really sits on the periphery as to what is, we'll just say, the norm of superhero activity or vigilante hero activity as it is. Here and now, he still is on the side of good, even if his methods are very much in the grey. He gets his quarry no matter what the cost, even if that means that he has to work with villains in order to get there. How exactly we get from this, where he is this morally grey superhero vigilante character, to the villain that we know him in the main series, will be an interesting one, and I really hope that they manage to handle this well, because if it's not done well, it's just gonna feel rather, well, crap, to put it rather bluntly. Because even when we ignore the difference between them on a more social level, how they see the world, how they perceive it, how they do things is vastly different. Stendhal seems to be a lot more deliberate and careful. He very much feels, again, like your typical vigilante superhero. He feels like the Punisher. He feels like Rorschach. He feels like, and I know that they're not strictly speaking a comic book character, but they feel like Charles Bronson's character from Death Wish. They don't rush into these things. They take their time to study their foe and then try and come up with the best solution to take them down. Whereas Stain, however, feels more like a slasher villain. He will stalk his prey for miles and miles and then take them down in quick and bloody affair. And exactly how we get this transition, this transformation between the two of them, is something that I really do want to see. Like, again, seeing how we get from a morally grey character to one that's very much more into the dark is an interesting one. But seeing how someone's methodology can change so much as well is something I'm fascinated by. But at the same time, there's a part of me that is terrified as to whether or not they're going to stick the landing with all of this. Part of me is worried that the big snapping moment, the moment that turns Stendhal into Stain, is just going to be Stendhal coming across some selfish hero that really is just in it for the money, and that's the thing that makes him decide to change his worldview. Like, he then decides, well, you know, this guy's an arsehole, so there's probably more arseholes out there, so I need to destroy all of them. Forget the villains, I need to take down the real villains, which are these heroes, or at least so-called heroes, even if evidence be damned. I'll be honest, I will be tempering my expectations either way, because either this will be handled very well, and I'll like how he gets to where we know him in the main series, providing, of course, this is indeed Stain, or maybe it won't, and it'll all go horribly, horribly wrong. But we'll all see. We'll see. I'm going to be tempering my expectations, because I really don't know how this will all hang together. And, of course, this, again, is providing that this even is Stain. It could quite easily be his brother. You know, it could be his older brother, then Stain finds Stendhal dead, and they're defeated by a hero, and that makes them become a hero killer. Maybe that's how it is. I really don't know. Beyond all of this, I have to say there's not really much else as far as positives I can really talk about. I did really like the I'll stop you drink driving poster that we see of All Might in the background in the bar. I liked that. That had a nice little bit of a charm to it. Even though you know for a fact that All Might is not the kind of person that would be stopping drink drivers. Maybe in the daytime. Probably not at night. That doesn't really seem like it's within his territory of control, so to speak. With all that said, however, let us get into the negatives. And unsurprisingly, one of the big negatives that I have towards this episode comes with our main villain, comes with Stendhal. Not necessarily how they're depicted, because again, I think they're brilliantly shown in this episode. We get a nice slice and understanding as to who they are and how they tick, and the action sequence that we see them involved in is, again, fantastic. One of the best I've seen thus far. However, that said, I do think that they've played their hand a bit too early, revealing that this guy is Stain. Again, it might not be him. It might be a brother or a relative or a character that ends up inspiring Stain down the road. But if it really is him, then this is way too early to be revealing all of this. Like, it really ruins the mystery here and adds a level of bias to the viewer. People who don't like Stain are going to get their back up on this guy and really dislike him and really discount anything that we learn about him going forward. People like me, I'm not a big fan of Stain, so anything from this point out is going to make me think, yeah, well, you would say that because you're just a serial killer. But people who do like Stain are going to be wanting to see when he becomes Stain. Or worse, they're going to treat these two as being two different people, even though they're not. It's like that really cringy thing that I see time and time again when people are talking about Breaking Bad and go, oh, this is the moment that Walter White became Heisenberg. Oh, Star Wars, this is the moment that Anakin Skywalker truly became Darth Vader. No, go to hell. They're the same person, it's just that we're seeing them in a darker, in some ways, a truer form of themselves. They're not different people. And that's what we're probably going to end up getting here. Like, either we're going to get people like myself getting a little bit defensive over the fact that this is Stain, or we're going to get people who really just want to see them become Stain. They want to see that one bad day moment come along, which I'm really not that comfortable with. And I think the main problem of all of this is the fact that it kind of leaves it rather unambiguous that it is Stain. Like, had we not seen them licking the blood to make the guys freeze, there would have still been a little bit of ambiguity there, because we just see this guy as being a ninja, really. We wouldn't know that there was anything more here. Maybe you could have hinted to it in a little way. Maybe show a vial of some blood knocking about in the background after all of this is said and done, or just not see him licking the blood and just imply that he did it. You know, that could have ended up causing some kind of ambiguity there, but we don't end up getting that. So at this point, it kind of is all but confirmed that it is him, which makes me worried as to exactly how long they're going to end up rolling this thing out. Are we going to find out next week? Are we going to find out in a couple of weeks' time? Are we going to find out by the end of this volume that it's him? Because the longer that you roll this out, well, inevitably we're going to get the, oh no, it's actually Stain, but a younger version of him, even though we figured that out weeks ago. We'll soon see about that. The only other negative that I really have is that I will be blunt, I am getting sick of the rather heavy references to American comic book characters. First time with the fake X-Men characters, it was cute. The second time with the design of Stendhal invoking that DC character I don't remember the name of, was fine. This time it's less so, and it kind of borders on what I was worried about in the episode where they introduced the fake X-Men characters, as it feels a lot more like a flex on comic books and American comic book culture, more so than it is just a simple reference. It is a whole, hey, look how much cooler the anime guy is. Ooh, he's so much better than the comic books and the Western animations, boy! Yeah. Though, of course, you could also translate this out as this is just a flex on Marvel, seeing as Stendhal is based on a DC character, and these are obviously fake Avengers. I don't know, maybe there's a part of me that's just paranoid on that, but I will say that I am getting sick to death of it. Like, I get it, I get that that's American and Western superhero culture is the main influence and driving force behind all of this, but for goodness sake, it's now starting to get a little bit silly. Like, it really is. It's now feeling like a case of, please, for the love of God, come up with your own original stuff. This isn't funny anymore. With all that said and done, however, let us get into the overview, and I have to say that this is a fine episode. I Really did like the getting to learn a lot more about Stendhal, what makes them tick, and a little bit more about their life philosophy. I would like to see exactly how they got to this point. I would like to, at the very least, get a hint as to why he did. At the moment, we really don't have that. We get a lot of talk about justice, and we got a lot of your typical gritty vigilante. Ooh, I don't like heroes and I don't like villains, but I gotta work with the villains, but I'm gonna get those villains in the end. Stuff which is fine, broadly speaking, but at the same time, it does feel like a case of, okay, so when are we getting to the fireworks factory? When are we gonna reveal that this guy actually is Stain? Because if I can guess, this is someone who, well, I'm not gonna say I'm an idiot, but let's be honest. If it is him, and we discovered it, possibly, what, 10 issues down the line, oh god, the next few issues are going to be a pain in the arse, aren't they? But still, we'll soon see how it ends up going. It will be interesting to see a little bit more of them and see how it's actually evolved into becoming Stain. If indeed it is him, it might not be. This might be his brother or a character that inspired him. So with all that said and done, let us get into Comment Corner! Now it's time for Comment Corner, and our first comment comes from Etch, who says, I've been looking forward to this, and this is of course referring to last week's video where I reviewed the episode Judgment, an episode where we got our great debut of Stendhal. I hope the review was what you're looking forward to. If not, well, hopefully this week does make up for it. I will admit there wasn't really much for me to say about last week, certainly as far as Stendhal was concerned, because it felt as though he made up such a minority of the overall runtime. We really didn't know much about him, apart from vague speculation, which this week feels as though it's starting to become true, but we'll soon see how all that goes. Our next comment comes from Big X1, who says, Stendhal is a great new villain / vigilante, but I think the next episode is a better opening for him than this one, which I have to agree with. I think that last episode was a fine debut for him. This definitely does feel like they have arrived. This is definitely the moment where we are getting a clearer identity idea as to who they are, and possibly what their true identity is, but we'll soon see about how this ends up going. Thank you for your comments, and by all means leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought about this particular episode. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and you will be read out in a future video. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!